If you want to take your Go programming skills to the next level, this is the course for you. Experienced Go developer Akhil Sharma will teach you how to build 10 projects using Go. The projects go in order of difficulty, starting with a simple web server.
So in this video, we'll learn how to build a very basic Golang web server. The prerequisite to this video is that you should have Golang installed on your system. And you should have a very basic idea of how Golang works, like packages, structs, and interfaces. And you can watch a video on how to install Golang if you don't have it on your system. And it doesn't matter if it's Ubuntu, Mac, or Windows. The steps that I'll be covering in this video will be similar for all of them. So I'm on my Windows laptop and I've opened up my PowerShell, which is basically a terminal for Windows. And on Mac, you'll have terminal, or on Ubuntu, you'll have your bash or your terminal again. So once you've installed Golang on your system, you'll have a folder called Go. So that's where you want to be. You want to be inside that folder called Go. And inside this folder, you want to be inside a directory called as src. Inside this src directory, we'll create a new directory called Go server. And we'll go inside this directory. This is where we'll create our code. So I'll open this in my code editor, which is VS Code. So now that I'm in my code editor, I'm going to go ahead and create a folder called static, where I'll keep my HTML or static files, and my main.go file where all my Golang code will reside. As you know, when we start writing any Golang code, we have to write package main in the beginning, and then we have to import some packages from package main. So one of the packages that I need is fmt, then I need the log package, then I need net/http package, which has most of the functions that I need to create a web server and the routes, right? And then, as you know, for every Golang code, we have to have func main, which is where most of the control of the operation lies, right? Now I'll switch over to my draw.io board and show you what exactly we're building. So I thought before we start building any of the functions, it's better to show you what we're building. So here's our server file, and here are the 3 routes that we'll be building today. One is the root route, which is just a slash. Then we have /hello, and then we have /form. When we hit the slash route or the root route, we'll just open up index.html file. And then we have /hello, which will just call a function, hello function. It'll just print hello to the screen. And then we have a /form route, which will have a form function associated with it, and then that will open up a form.html file for us, right? So we have to create index.html and form.html files right now, and then we have to write these routes inside our func main, and then we have to create these functions also inside our main.go file, right? So now that you have a 10,000 feet view of what we're doing, it'll just everything will make a lot more sense. So now let's switch back to our VS Code. Back in our VS Code, you have seen that we had worked till this point, till func main. Now it's time to create 2 files, index.html and form.html in our static folder. In index.html, we'll write some very basic code. We'll say HTML, and then we'll say head, and we'll say title. Here we'll say static website, and after the head we'll place a body tag. Inside the body tag we'll have an h2 tag, and we'll again say static website, and that's about it. In our form, we'll have /doc type HTML. Then we have an HTML tag. We'll have a head tag. Inside the head tag, we'll say meta charset is equal to UTF-8 slash, right? So that's what our meta tag does. And then we have our body tag, which will have a div. It will have a form method is equal to post, right? So we want to post the form, and then we'll have slash form, right? And then we have our label. I'm assuming that you already know HTML, so I'm not explaining a lot of things, right? But anyways, this is the name field that we want the user to input, right? So we'll have input name is equal to name, and then you have type is equal to text. And you can also skip this part if you don't really want to bother about HTML. And then you have label, then you have address, then you have your input name is equal to address, and type equal to text, and value nothing, right? And then you have your input type is equal to your submit button, and then value is equal to submit. So a submit button which will have submit written over it, right? And this completes our form that we want the user to fill, right? And now we want to start wiring up our main logic, which is inside the func main. So inside func main, we'll have a file server, which is basically a function that we get inside the HTTP package that we just imported. So we'll say file server, where S is capital, so make sure you say that. And here you have a short form assignment operator, which basically declares and defines a variable, right? So with colon n is equal to, and then you have http dot directory dot static dot slash static, I meant. So we're telling Golang that we want you to check out the static directory, and now Golang automatically knows that it has to look at the index.html file, because as you know, PHP, Golang, Node.js, all of them look at the index.html file, right? That's what they're trained to do as servers. And now you have a handle function inside your HTTP package, right? And so I want to start handling my root route, which is just the slash route. So how do I handle it? I say send that to the file server function that I just created, which is just on top of this. And then you have your http dot handle func, which handle func is another function that we get inside the HTTP package. And now I want to handle my slash form route, and you have form handler, right? So we'll create the form handler function shortly. And then you have another handle func, where we'll handle our slash hello function, right? Slash hello route, which will call the hello handler function. So far so good. I've already shown you what slash hello and slash form are supposed to do. Slash form will show us the form, which is form.html. Just the slash will serve us the index.html file, which I've shown you how it will do that. And slash hello will just print out hello to the screen, and we'll have to create a function called hello handler for that. And now let's also print out what will be printed out when our server connects. So server started at port 8080 and right. So if you want to put new line, you have to use printf, which is inside the fmt package that we've just imported. Now let's handle our server. So we use the listen and serve function inside the HTTP package. So as you can see, HTTP package is very important, and this will create the server. So this is really the heart of the software that we're creating, right? So there can be the error can be there or it could be nil. So one of these two values will be assigned to ERR, which is the error. So now let's handle the error. If it's not equal to nil, then we want to do something. So we want to log dot fatal error, and this is where we used our log package to handle or to log the error. So far so good with the main.go. Now we want to start creating our main functions. So first we'll create the hello handler, and func hello handler. This usually has two things. So one is W and the other is R, right? So W is http.response writer. So as you know, with any API or any route, you'll have either a response and a request. So request is something that the user sends to the server, and response is what the server sends back to the user. So we'll keep that value in W, which is the response, and for the request that the user will send, which will be in http.request, this star is a pointer, so R is basically pointing to the request, right? So yeah, I'm assuming you have basic idea of how pointers work. Even if you don't, it's okay. I think you can just follow this video, right? So as soon as we wrote func hello handler, you can see the squiggly line below hello handler went away, because now it knows what to do when it encounters this route. So now let's start writing out our function. So URL R is, as you know, the request. So when the user sends a request, which will be in the form of, like, let's say /hello, right? So what you want to see is if user dot if the r.url.path is not equal to hello. Now we're sending the request, which is /hello, to the hello handler, but let's say by mistake something comes here. So now we want to check if the path is not hello handler. Then we'll do something. We'll say http.error w/404 not found, and http.status not found. All right, and we'll just return from the function. And then if r.method not is equal to get. So we want only like when you type /hello in your browser, right? That by default is a get method, right? And we don't want people to post anything to /hello. We want people only to get, and in the sense just print out hello, right? That's why we are saying that if it's not get, then again you will return an error, http.error, which will be W again, and method is not supported. Then you have http.status not found. Now again, status not found is again inside HTTP packet, so you can see how important that is. And then we'll again return from this function if this is the condition. But the ideal condition would be that we want to just print to the screen, which is f print f. So FMT, by the way, has a lot of these functions like printf, println, fprintf, right? You can check them out, and they're all for very different things. And so we'll say hello, and that's what our hello handler will do. Now there's a squiggly line below form handler. So that means we want to write a form handler function. So let's start doing that. So we'll say func form handler w http.response writer and r asterisk http.request. Now you're going to be using this very often, so just it's the same syntax, so you can keep it copy pasted somewhere and then just keep copy pasting it. That's completely all right. And again we'll have the same thing if error is equal to parse form. So we want to parse a form, right? We want people to submit something in their form.html file, and there will be a post request, and that will parse the form. error not equal to nil. Basically, if there is error, then we want to say print fmt dot f printf w slash parse form error %v comma error. Okay, then we return. So this is just basically printing out the error, and here we'll say f printf w comma post request successful, which is the ideal scenario, which is where we want to be. And we'll say name is equal to, so whatever we'll fill in the form, right? You remember the form. So whatever we'll fill in the form, we want the values to be taken into these variables. So r dot form value name. So we want name from the form to come to name. And then we want address to be equal to r dot form value address. And we'll say fmt dot f printf w comma name is equal to %s new line comma name, and then we'll say fmt dot f printf is basically printing it on the screen. F printf w comma, so whatever the user has written, so we're just going to basically print it out here. Now you must have seen that there was a squiggly line below a name, and then once we used name out here, the squiggly line went away, because Golang tries to tell you that you've defined this variable but you're not using it. So that's an error in Golang, and this doesn't happen with JavaScript, and you can have like millions of variables that you never end up using, and that's a problem, right? So that's a nice thing about Golang, that it catches all of that. And then we'll say address. So now the squiggly line below address is also gone away. Now this completes our function. So let's head over to the PowerShell and check it out if it works. So back inside our terminal or PowerShell, we're still inside that folder go-server where we've written all our code. And now we're going to run a command called go build, which will create a binary executable file. It'll be a .exe file because I'm on Windows. And now I can run go run main.go. So we have given our main file the name main.go, but you could have named it anything else. But main.go is the usual accepted standard, right? So that's why we named it main.go. Now we're going to run that code, and it's going to say starting server at port 8080 because that's what we had written, if you remember, in our func main. It's showing me a pop-up which is asking me for my permission for my firewall, so I'm going to allow access. You might not see that in your in the screen recording software probably. Now we'll have to head over to our browser to see what's happening out there. So let's go to our browser, and here we'll open a new tab. We'll say localhost 8080. Now you remember we have three routes. We're handling three different routes, right? So one is the root route, which is just the slash. Then we have /hello, and then we have /form.html, right? So we have those three routes that we're handling. So slash we are handling using file server, and then we are handling hello using hello func handler, the function hello handler function. And then we are handling /form using the form handler function, right? So in the diagram, if you see this, right, /hello/form, and then with slash we want to open up the index.html file where we just written static server, and that will be printed to the screen. And then we have /hello where we just want to print out hello to the screen, and then we have a /form where we'll open up a form.html file, and then we'll fill up the form, and then it'll post to the server and it'll print out something to the screen again, right? So let's start off by checking out the slash route and see what happens. It says static website, right? Which is exactly what is written inside the index.html file. And if we say slash hello, the hello handler function will be called and you'll just print out hello to the screen. And then if we have form.html, I'll just enter my details here and submit. So remember, it'll say post request successful because that's what we had written in our code, right? Inside the form handler function. And after you submitted those details, it's just going to print out those details to the screen. That's all it does. So fprintf name and fprintf address, if you remember writing that, right? So it's just printing out those values to the screen. That's what our simple web server in Golang does. In this video, we'll build a complete CRUD API using Golang, and we'll have something called as a movie server, which will give us the list of all movies, and we can create, update, and delete as well. That's what CRUD stands for. And this diagram is a 10,000 feet view of what we'll be building, so that once we start coding, you won't have any confusions, right, of why we're doing certain things. So there won't be a database. That's why I put a big cross here, that we are not going to use a database. We'll instead use structs and slices to actually perform operations on the data inside the server itself. And we'll be serving it on localhost 8000. We'll be using Gorilla Mux, and Gorilla Mux is an external library, so I'll show you how to install it as well. And so we'll have 5 different routes. So we'll have a get all route, we'll have a get by ID route, create route, update route, and delete route. And that's something you need to remember, because once we start coding, you'll understand why I have shown you this diagram. So every single route will have a corresponding function. So if it's a get all route, it'll have a get movies function. If it's a get by ID, then you'll have a get movie function without the S. And then if it's a create route, it'll have a create movie function, and so on for update and delete as well, right? Now there are 2 types of endpoints, slash movies or slash movies by ID, and we have to use them depending on what we're doing. In the sense, if we're creating, then obviously it's slash movies. If you're updating, then obviously the ID is required, so it has to be slash movies slash ID, right? And then there are methods. So there are get methods for get all and get by ID. We'll use get method. For create, we'll use post. For update, we'll use put. And for delete, we'll use the delete method. And we'll be using postman to test all these endpoints using all these methods, right? So what we'll start doing now is we'll start first, we'll create a directory for keeping this project, and then we'll start writing the code, and then I'll take you to Postman to test all the APIs. So the prerequisite here is that you need to have Golang installed on your system. Now I'll see you on the PowerShell. So now we are at our PowerShell. For Windows, we have PowerShell. For Ubuntu or Mac, you'll have your terminal. Is the same thing, and the commands that I'll be writing here will be exactly the same for Mac and Ubuntu as well, so you don't have to worry. Now the prerequisite, like I said, is that you should have Golang installed in your server, on your system, I meant. And that means that you'll have a folder called as Go in your system, right? So you have to go inside the Go folder, you have to go inside SRC. If you don't have SRC, then you can create SRC, but you'll definitely have bin and package, I think. So you can create the SRC folder, and now you're inside the SRC folder, right? As you can see here. Now we'll create a directory called Go Movies CRUD, and we're going to cd inside this directory, right? And like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, that we'll be using Gorilla Mux. Now Gorilla Mux is not part of the main package that you get with Golang, right? So it's an external package. So the way to install that is using go-get. And you have to put the github.com link for the same, right? So the link for Gorilla is gorilla/mux, and then github.com/gorilla/mux, and then you use go-get to get it. And then once I hit enter, it's going to install it in my Go Movies CRUD folder. Now I'll open up my code editor window. You could use Notepad++. I'm using VS Code in this video, so I'm going to open up this folder in Code Plus in VS Code, like I said, and I'm going to try and shift to the Visual Studio Code. So I think now you can see VS Code on your screen as well. And here we'll create a file called main.go. Now this video is a beginner friendly video, so I'm not going to have different folders and a very complex project structure which will have routes and controllers and models and database and all of those files and folders, because that will I'll have to configure the Go path, I'll have to configure the relative routing and all of those things. So I don't want you to be confused if you're a beginner. So If you've just learned Golang and you just want to get your hands dirty with building a server and building a REST API, this is the right video for you. So I'm going to try and write everything in the main.go file, right? So that you don't get confused. And this is also why I'm also not using a database, and I'm using just structs and slices to actually manipulate the data inside Golang itself. And so let's get started. So as you know that when we write the main.go file, the first thing that we have to write is the package main, right? So, and then we start importing the packages that we need. So I know that I'll be using FMT because I'm going to be printing out stuff like your server is connected and that kind of stuff. I know that I'll be using log because I want to log out the errors if there's any error for connecting to the server. And then I'll be using encoding/JSON. By the way, all these are part of the package main, so you don't have to really worry. So encoding/JSON, I need this because I want to encode my data into JSON when I send it to Postman. And then I need math/random. We'll be creating. So let's say the user adds a new movie to this movie server. So we need to create a new ID for it, and that will be created using math/random. So that's why I need that. And then I obviously need net/HTTP because this allows us to create a server in Golang. So it's quite important, obviously. And then you have your string conversion because the ID that I'll create using math.random will be an integer, and then I'll have to convert it into a string. So I'll use string convert, and I'll use itoa to format the integer and then convert into string. So, and then I'll have the external library that we just installed, which is Gorilla Mux. So you'll say github.com and /gorilla/mux. Now you'll get a squiggly line for all these packages because you have imported them, but you're not using them. So Golang knows that, and Golang is going to trouble you till the time you start using those packages, and which will be quite soon for us. So we'll start using them soon. Now, if you remember, I told you that we won't be using a database. We'll be using structs and slices, right? Struct is basically like an object in JavaScript. If you've used JavaScript or Java or any other language, it's like an object, and you're going to define. You're going to have almost like key value pairs. And you're going to define, the types of data inside that. So I'm going to have a struct of type movie, and I'm going to have a struct of type director. Okay. And movies and directors are going to be associated in the sense that every movie has a director. That's how they're going to be associated. So movie will have multiple other things. It'll have an ID, which will be string, right? And then you put this character, which is I think called caret. I'm not sure. This is directly below the escape button on your keyboard. And then you say JSON, and then you say ID within double quotes. And then you have ISBN, which is basically just a number assigned, a unique ID assigned to a film. And then you have again those caret characters, and then you have JSON and ISBN. Let's write struct here, then the squiggly line will hopefully go away. And then you would have the title of the movie. Obviously the movie has a title, right? And you'll put string here, and then you put a JSON, and then you'll say it's title. Then you have to say director, star, director, and JSON, director. And star is a pointer, as you know. So that means if I create a struct called director, it will be associated to movie struct. And with director, what I'm saying is that director will have the same values that I'll define inside the director, right? So these are strings, ID, ISBN, and title are strings, but director is a type of director, which is a struct that I've defined, which I'm defining right now. And director will have first name, which will be a string, JSON, and first name, and it'll have a last name, which will again be JSON, last name, right? So when we send this data using Postman, we'll be using ISBN ID title and director in small with small what do you call it, small caps. Same with first name and last name. That's why we're defining JSON like this, so that we're able to encode and decode the JSON when it comes from Postman. And so we've defined our two structs, and like I said, movies are associated to directors, right? Every movie has one director. And then we'll have our, so we'll define a variable called movies. It will be a slice of the type movie. This, right? So because we'll be using movies very often now, you'll see why. I won't try to explain it. I'll just show you instead. So we, as you know, every Golang code, every Go file has func main, right? In func main, you will have your in Golang, I'm sure you know that you have colon is equal to, which declares and defines a variable at the same time. So you'll have mux dot new router. New router is a function inside the mux library inside Gorilla. So R is now your new router. And then you'll have R dot handle func, and you'll have 5 functions here. So let me take you back to the Chrome and show you those 5 functions. So we'll have 5 routes, as you remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll have 5 different functions, right? So inside our func main file itself, func main function itself, we'll have to define these routes and functions. So let's go back to the code window. I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah, so now you can see it. So I'm back at the code window, and now I need to create 5 different routes and 5 different functions, right? So first route is the movies route. I'll get movies. Get movies will be the function. So if I hit the get slash movies route, I'll need to take it to the get movies function, which I'll define in some time. Till the time I don't define it, it's going to give me a squiggly line and say that you don't have this function. And the method I'll be using here is get. You've seen this on the diagram that I'll be using get method for getting all the movies, right? Then you'll have r.handle func slash movies slash id and get movie. So as you can see, there's no s here, it's get movie, get a singular movie. And methods again is get. Then you have a r.handle func slash movies comma create movie, and methods is post. Then you have r.handle. I'm not copying and pasting r.handle func this line. I'm typing it again and again because I want you to type as well, and that will ensure that you have some muscle memory, and then you'll be able to write code on the fly really quickly, and you won't make a lot of mistakes. So it's always good to write it again from scratch. So we have a function here called update movie. Then you will have methods, and we'll say put, and we'll say r.handle func slash movie slash id again. And we have delete movie dot methods delete. Okay, so we have the functions, we have the methods, and we have the routes. So all of that makes sense. And to start the server, what we'll say is, so first we'll have to print starting server at port 8000 /n, right? And I'm going to say, I'm going to log out if the server doesn't start, and I'm going to put, I'm going to use the listen and serve function inside the HTTP package that I have here, HTTP package. So to start a server is very simple in Golang, right? All you have to do is HTTP dot listen and serve. That's all you have to do. And you have to write the name of the port. So I have to put this colon in front of it because localhost colon 8000, right? We'll be hitting that address when we start the server. So I have these 5 functions, get movies, get movie. So I have to create all those 5 functions, and I have the method set out here. Now, before I do any of that, when we go to our Postman and when we'll hit the server, right? When we'll hit the API /movies, and we want to get all the movies, in the beginning, there won't be any movies. So that we don't want that. We want it to have at least a couple of movies, right? So that we know that the server, the API is working perfectly. Otherwise, we'll never come to know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take movies struct, this slice of movies, right, that I just created here. That's what I was saying, that I'm going to show it to you very soon, so you don't have to worry about it. So we have the slice called movies, and I'm going to append a couple of movies to it. And by the way, all the operations that we'll be doing in this, in all these 5 functions, will be around this slice called movies, because we'll be storing a lot of these different movies. And the type obviously is this. This is an entire type, right? Or you can call it a class or an object or whatever. This is an entire type, and then we'll have multiple movies of this type, the complete struct type, right? And then you have movies append, and then you have movies, right? Because we want to append to movies, and we want to append a movie to movies, right? Which will be an object, just like this. It will be an object, a struct, and we'll have to define all these things like ID, ISBN, title, and all those things. So I'll say ID 1. I'll say ISBN 438-227. Let's say title movie 1. And for director, the syntax is slightly different. Okay. So you'll say director, and then you'll say ampersand director, because we want the reference object, we want the reference of the address of director, right, which is this out here. That's how we'll be able to use the pointer director. So if you've used pointers in C or any other language, you'll just know that ampersand is to give you the address, and percentage or so the asterisk is used to access that address, or the pointer. And then you have the director, which is first name John and last name Doe. So I have one movie, I'll create another movie, append movies, movie object, and it will have an ID. Just a second, there seems to be some issue. Yeah, so it will be an ID to ISBN 45425, and then I have a title movie 2. Then you have your director again. Director, first name. So what should be a good first name and last name? Let's keep it Steven Smith. Steve, and last name is Smith. I'll actually keep the S capital, even with, yeah, Steve S is capital, I think. Yeah. So like I said, we have our movies. So when we now hit the get movies function, at least we'll have 2 movies that will show up, right? So we'll at least know if the API is working and the server is working fine. And now let's start creating our get all movies function. So what I'll do is I'll create the get all movies function, then I'll create the delete function, and then I'll create the get movie function, create function, and update function. Because update function is it will look a little complicated to you. It will be the most intimidating, so I want to tackle it at last, so that you at least get used to the syntax before that. So let's create get movies. Okay, w http.response writer, comma r star http dot request. So we're passing a pointer of the request that you will send from your Postman to this function, and w is the response writer. So when we send a response from this function, it will be w, right? So we'll say w dot header dot set. Basically, we want to set the content type as JSON, right? So we want to work with JSON. The thing is that the struct, our Golang struct, needs to be able to convert the JSON coming into its own format. So that's why we have to set this content type, and then we'll say application slash JSON, and then we'll say JSON dot new encoder, which we got from here, encoding slash JSON, right? JSON. This is the same JSON, JSON.new encoder, and you're going to encode W. Basically, the response that you want to send to it, you want to encode it into JSON, and dot encode, and you want to pass the complete movies slice that you have. So, like I said, whenever we create slices, we're just going to append a new movie to the movie slice that already exists. Whenever we want to update anything, we'll be traversing inside movies, and we'll be updating something inside the movies slice as well. So movie slice is quite central, and when we return the list of all movies, we'll be returning or resolving basically the entire movie slices at the same time. So this is why the movies slice is at the center of this entire operation that we're doing right now. So you've seen now you know how you can get all movies, right? So you basically want to encode it into JSON, and then you want to just encode movies and send the JSON of all the movies of the slice, which has the type struct, which is struct movie, right? So all of these movies you will be able to send to the front end or to Postman or wherever. Now we'll create the delete function, because that also looks a little easy, right? And then we'll get into get one and create and delete functions. So let's delete a movie. Now when you want to delete a movie, you'll be passing an ID of the movie. So we'll say w http dot response writer again, and r star http dot request. You'll have w dot header dot set, again the same thing, content type, and you want it to be application slash JSON. And now I'll get some params, right? So the ID that I'll pass from my Postman, which will go as a param to this function, delete movie. And that param, which will be the ID, will be present inside mux.vars and inside the response, the request, which is R. So it will be part of the request, right? The pointer to the request that I'm sending out here. So in params, now I'll be able to access the ID. So what I'll do is I'll range over movies. Ranging over movies, if you've used JavaScript, it's very similar to like for each basically. So all you're doing is you're just going over all of the movies, and you want to find a particular movie. And now what you want to do is if item.id, or the ID that you pass. So you'll say that delete the ID 2, in the sense the movie with the ID 2, right? So the ID which you now have access to, which will be params ID. So you know that we got params, we got the ID that you sent as a request to this function, will be inside params and will be inside ID. So you will have access to that particular movie, that particular ID, I mean. And inside movies, you'll go through all the movies one by one, and each of the movie will be inside items. So with item.id, you'll be able to access each of the IDs of the movies, right? So if the item.id of a movie which is inside our movie slice is equal to the ID that you just passed as a params to the request, then what should we do? We should take the movie slice and we should append basically we want to delete it, right? So we're appending it. I'll show you how you can delete something by using append. So we'll say movies and index. So for a range function, right, you have to pass index and item. Index is like, I is equal to 1. Well, this is very much like JavaScript. Like so for index you have I. So I starts from 0 and goes till a particular value. And item is actually the item. So if you used a for in loop or a for off loop, you would know that you can access or iterate over the exact item itself. And in Golang, you can do both at the same time. And you will have movies index +1 and ... So what you're doing here essentially is whatever ID that's matching right now that you want to delete, it's going to basically take that and directly append all of the other data, which is basically index +1. All of the other data is going to just append it in that place, in this place. So that means this movie now won't exist. So the ID that you just passed with the index, it won't exist because in place of that, the entire movies, index +1. After that, all the movies that were there, they came out here, right, in this place. So the movies that you want to delete now will not exist. So that's how you delete a movie, right, using append. Now we'll get a particular movie by using getMovie function. So we'll create the getMovie function. And again, we'll have w/http dot response writer. We'll have r star http dot request. W dot header dot set. And again, your content type, comma, application / JSON. Then just the same way we did with delete movie, you will get params, the ID in the params, right? In the same place exactly, where R is the request that the user sends, and mux is the package that we're using for creating these routes, and vars is inside mux, right, which helps us to get access to all the things in request, so basically the params. And then we'll loop through the movies one by one. So if I want to get a particular movie from the slice of the movies that exist with me in Golang, all I have to do is I have to go through all the movies and then find that one and then encode into JSON and send it to the front end or to Postman, right? So here we'll again use the for loop just like we did in delete movies, but there'll be a difference here. Instead of index, we'll write the blank identifier because we don't want to use index because we won't be using index, right? And if you don't use something in Golang, you have to use the blank identifier, otherwise Golang will give you those squiggly lines and give you an error that you have defined this variable but you have not used it, right? That's why we have to use this blank identifier. Now we'll range over the movies and we'll say if item.id is equal to params id, right? So inside params I have passed an id, so it's going to try and compare that with item.id because it's going to range over all the movies one by one, and each movie will be inside item, and so we'll have the access of id inside the item, and that will compare with params.id that we just passed. And if they're equal, then you just have to return it. That's all you need to do. You don't have to do any other operation. So you'll say new encoder w dot encode item, and then you'll just return. Now I'm sure now you can see why I showed you the delete function before the getMovie function, right? And that's because in delete function we used the range, but we didn't have a blank identifier. If I would have used a blank identifier directly, then you would have gotten confused. So that's why I wanted to show you the delete function before. Now in delete movie, once we delete the movie, I think it's better to also return all the existing movies after you've deleted that movie. So what I'll do is I'll try and return the remaining movies as well. So I'll say new encoder w dot encode movies, just like I did in get movies, right? JSON.new encoder w dot encode movies, right? And in get movie, we're just sending one particular movie, which will be the item. As you know that with range, you can access each movie using the item, right? So we're just sending back one movie. Whereas with delete movies, we're sending back all the remaining movies. With get movies, we're sending back all the movies. So get, delete, get movie. I'm sure these are clear now. Now we'll take a look at create movie. So we'll create movie, which obviously is the most important function because you want to create movies. It's going to be a post method, response writer, and r star http dot request. The spelling of response is wrong, so it's giving me a squiggly line, so I'll say response. It's best to keep looking at the squiggly line so that you can handle all the errors while writing the code itself. So now you can see that none of the functions have a squiggly line anymore except update movie because you've not defined it yet. So that's why there's a squiggly line there. And we have used all of the packages as well. So the squiggly lines have gone except math random and string convert that we'll be using in update movie. And update movie is obviously the most intimidating function. So I have not shown it to you yet. And that's why we'll look at the last. And now we have create movie header dot set. So this is something that we do every single time, right? Content type comma application slash JSON. Then we'll define a variable called movie of type movie, and you'll soon see why. And we'll create a blank identifier again. We'll decode r.body. So while creating a movie, we'll send something in the body. We'll send an entire movie like this, We'll send it in the body in Postman. So we want to now decode that body, right? We want to decode that JSON body. And we'll say decode and movie. Right, so we'll get that value here in this and movie, right? After decoding it, I will say movie.id. So this is where we'll use your string convert and your math.random because we want to create a new movie now, right? So to create a new movie, we also need to create a new ID, which will be completely random ID. So what we'll do is we'll say random.int n, which is a function inside random math random library package. And we'll say 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can put as many zeros as you want. So I want to value between 1 and this maximum value to create a random value, right? And then I'll have to now format it into string. So I'll say string convert dot itoa, which is a function inside string convert package. And that's how I'll get a new movie ID. So I'll say movies is equal to append. Like we saw how with delete movies you could append, right? And now with create movie also you want to append, just like we did when we created a new movie. We want to append the new movie that has just come to movies. That's all we want to do. So it's very simple. So we'll say append and we'll say movies comma movie, because the new movie that has come from the body is now inside this movie, which we decoded from JSON into now a format that is readable by Golang, and it will now look like this. It will look like a struct, right? So that, like we said, movies, comma, and the entire movie. So that's what we're doing here. Essentially, we're just saying movies and comma movie that we just received from the body that the user just sent from their Postman, and now which has been converted into a format readable by Golang, right? So really simple. Now, since we have appended it here, now we want to also return this movie that was just created, just to tell the user that, hey, I have created this movie, so you don't have to worry. So we'll say encode and movie. So the movie is now created. Now comes the most intimidating function, which is update movie function. I'll start writing it out. Update movie. And here we'll be passing an ID, right? So you know how to get the ID, right? You'll get it in params, which will be inside mux.vars and inside R, right? The params will be there. And then we'll have to again range over all the movies. And then what we'll be doing for updating movies is we'll first delete that movie for the ID that you'll send, and then we'll just simply add the new ID that the new movie that we'll be sending from Postman. So this is not obviously the right way to do things when you work with databases, but we're just doing it here. Since we're not using a database, we can get away with that. We'll just delete the ID of the movie that the movie with the ID that you send from Postman, and then we'll just add the new movie that you'll send, the new struct you'll send in that same place. We'll add it there. So I hope that makes sense. Or maybe should I just write some pseudocode and so that it becomes really clear to you. So first what we'll do is we'll set our JSON content type, which we always do, right? And then the next step will be that we'll get access to our params. Then we'll loop over the movies, or we'll range over them, range over the movies. Then what we'll do is we'll delete the movie of the ID, with the ID that we have sent. So first we'll delete it, and then we'll simply add a new movie, which will be the movie that we send in the body, Postman. So instead of actually updating that particular record in a database, we're just deleting it and then just adding a new record from the body that you're sending, which is a nice little hack and something that you shouldn't do when you work with actual databases, right? It's just to show you right now. So this is the pseudocode. One by one, let's start writing our code then, right? So now we want to set JSON content type. How do we do that? We do that by wheader dot set content type, which T is capital, and we will say comma application slash JSON. And then we want our params, right? So to get params, we'll say params is equal to mux.vars r. We have been doing this till now. Now we're going to loop over the movies, and we're going to delete the movie, and then we'll add a new movie. So we'll do all of these three things now at the same time. So we'll say for index. Now we want to use index in this case, so we won't use this blank identifier here, because we want to use index. We'll say is equal to range movies, and if item dot id is equal to params id, what should happen? So like I said, we'll delete over the movies using range, and then we'll find that movie in our movies slice, and we'll delete that particular movie with the ID that you've sent. So we found it with the ID that you've sent. Now we want to delete it. So we'll say movies is equal to append. So we'll write the exact same line that we've written in delete movies to delete it. So we'll say inside append, we'll use the exact same syntax. So we'll say movies and index comma movies index plus 1, and say dot dot dot. Right, so let me see if that's what we've written earlier as well. Yeah, there were no mistakes earlier, so it's the same thing. Now we'll say var movie of type movie. Now because we want to append that movie, so that's why we're going to try and follow the same code that we've written for create movie. And we're essentially going to we can copy and paste this whole thing, but I'm just going to write it again, right? So like I said, we're adding a new movie, the movie that we sent in the body. So we'll say equal to JSON dot new decoder r dot body. We'll decode the body, right? And we'll keep it movie, which is this. So we'll say movie.id is equal to params ID. So the ID that we have passed. So this is the only step that's different from create movie, right? Because we want to have it in the same ID. We want to use the same ID. So we'll say movies is equal to append movies comma movie. Let's say JSON.new encoder w dot encode movie, because we want to return the movie to the user to tell him that, hey, I have done what you wanted me to do. I'll remove these comments since now you already know how this is supposed to work. Now, one thing that we have not done inside update movie is w http dot response writer comma r star http dot request. Right, so all looks good now. All we have to do now, I think, is write return here, and then we're good to go. I don't think there are any issues or errors here, so I can go ahead and compile this code maybe. Right, so let me take you back to the PowerShell. So I'm back in the PowerShell now. So I'm still inside that folder, Go Movies CRUD. And as you can see, I have that main.go file. So all I have to do now is go build. I've built it. And now we have to say go run main.go. It's going to now start the server, and it's going to ask me for firewall access. Maybe you don't see it in your screen because it's a pop-up. So I'll say allow access. So yeah, so now it's running on server 8000. Now let's go head over to our Postman. So let me see if I can do that, or I'll have to maybe pause the video and then show you Postman. Yeah, I can show you Postman. Yes, I think you can see it now. I'm using OBS, so it's difficult to switch between tabs actually in OBS screen recorder. Now I have created this folder called rough just for my own use. You can probably create just a new folder, and inside this I'm going to create a new folder called Go Movies. Inside Go Movies, I'll have a request. The request will be get all. Then I'll have a new request, get by ID. I'll have a new request again. It'll be I can do the create, then update and delete. So for get all you have to do is http/localhost/movies, right? So you have to write http://localhost:8000/movies. That's what you have to write. And let's hit the server, and voila, the server is working. We have got our 2 movies that we created in our VS Code, right? Because we didn't want this to be empty, so we had created 2 movies using append and in our func main. So these are those 2 movies. Let's get a movie by ID. So I'm going to take the same route here. I'm going to put /1 because I want just the first movie, so I'll get just the first movie, as you can see. Right, now I want to create a movie. To create a movie, I'll just say I won't give the ID obviously, because Golang will create the ID and so on. And I'll go here and say I'll body, and I'll say raw, and I'll say JSON, and now write. I'll just copy paste this one little from my get all. I'll copy and paste one movie here in the body. I'll change the ID. I'll say 7. I'll change the number to something else. Let's say movie 7. And I'll probably delete a couple. And the name here, I'll say Sharma. So it has added that movie called 7, but it's not sending me that movie 7. It should have sent me that movie 7 here. So there's something wrong. We'll have to, oh, sorry, I'm still on get. So remember to switch to post method here, right? So when you say send, it gives you the movie that you just created, which is this movie 7, right? And ID, there's no point of sending ID because ID, as we know, it's going to create on its own. So I was wrong when I did that. So even if I create one more, it's going to create one more ID with the same values. So now when I get all, I'll see 4 different values, right? Now let's try and edit one of these. So let's update. First, let me just copy this whole thing here and switch this to put, and then we'll put the ID of one of the movies here. Let's put this ID here and update, right? And then we'll have to say send something in the body, which will be the new movie. The new movie can be copied from here, and we can change some of the values, like we'll put it Arnold, and I'll just say S because I can't spell shopmaker. I'll say something else here, ISBN. And so let's see what happens. So yeah, the movie has been updated. The movie 7 had first name Akhil Sharma, and now it just has Arnold S. So even if we get all, we'll be able to see that the movie 7 has, so there's one movie with Akhil Sharma, there's one movie with Arnold S because we had created 2 right in the beginning. Now let's try to delete this. So I'm going to first copy this thing and put it in delete, and then I'll put the ID. I'll go back here, I'll get the ID from here. So now it's returning me the movie that has been deleted, which was movie 7 Arnold S. So now when I get all, I won't see that movie, hopefully. I'm still seeing that movie, actually. Why is delete not working? Oh, sorry, it's on get. Again, I made the same mistake. So I have to use the method delete for it. So don't make the same mistakes that I'm making, all right? So now there are only 3 movies. So it's returned me all the movies that are now left, right? So there are only 3 movies left. Even if I say get all, there are only 3 movies left. Let's delete one more. Let's delete this one also, so that only 2 movies will be left. So yeah, only 2 movies are left now, right? So remember to change the method when you're using Postman. We'll be building a bookstore management system using Golang. So we'll be building some CRUD APIs, and these are beginner friendly. We'll be using MySQL database. We'll be using the GORM package to interact with our database. And then we look at JSON marshalling and unmarshalling. And the biggest change here is that we'll have a proper project structure. In the sense, we won't be writing all of our code in main.go file. We'll have a proper project structure, which I'll explain to you shortly. And then we'll be using Gorilla Mux. So with project structure, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have 2 main folders in our project. One will be the CMD folder, the other will be the package folder. The CMD folder will only have the main.go file, and the package folder will have the config folder, controllers folder, models folder, routes folder, and utils folder. So we'll have 5 different folders inside the package folder, right? Inside config, we'll have app.go file, which will help us to connect with our database. In the controllers, we'll have book controllers, which will have the functions that will help us to process the data that we'll get as response, and also the request that we'll get from the user and the response that we need to send. So we'll process all of that in the book controller. In the book models, in the models folder, we'll have book.go file, which will help us to create those structs and models that will be used by our database. In the routes, as you know, we'll just write our routes, and which I'll get into later on in just 2 minutes. I'll show you what the routes are. And in the utils, we'll just have some code for marshalling and unmarshalling JSON from our response and our request, right? And then these are the routes that we'll have. So we'll have /book/route twice. One will be for post and one will be for get. And these are our controller functions that I've mentioned here. So if you post on the /book route, sorry, I think this needs to change. This will actually be get, and this will be post. All right. So if you get on our /book route, you will we'll call the get books controller function. If you post, use the post method on our /book route, we'll create a book, right? We'll have to send something in the body, and we'll have to use our JSON marshalling and unmarshalling to get the data here to the database. And then if we do get on /book/book ID, which we'll pass the book ID, so we'll get the book by ID. So we'll have to create function to get a book by ID. Then we'll have our put method for updating the book, right? And on the same route /book/book ID. And then we'll have our delete method on /book/ID route, which will give us the delete book the function in controller functions. So that's our entire introduction on what we're going to build and how we're going to build it. The next steps include where I'll go to my Ubuntu terminal. I'll start these different folders. I'll create this complete project structure, and then we'll open our VS Code. We'll start creating these folders and these files, and then we'll start writing all of that, right? And before that, in our Ubuntu, we'll also have to install the packages that we'll be using. So in many of the videos that you'll see on YouTube, you might see people first including those packages in their files while they're coding, and then they'll use go mod tidy or something like that to install the package that they've used. But in our case, what we'll do is we'll install those packages beforehand, and then we'll include them in our code. It's just something that I prefer, and I also recommend you also do that. So that's the introduction, and let's get started. So as you can see, I've opened up my terminal. Since I'm on Ubuntu, this is a terminal. If you are on Windows, it'll be a PowerShell, and if you are on Mac, it'll be a terminal again. The commands will be the same. It doesn't have to, the commands won't change. So I'm going to go ahead and go inside the folder where I write all my Go code, where all my Go programs reside. You can do the same. And I'm going to go ahead and create a directory for the new project, and it will be called Go Bookstore in my case. And I'm going to go ahead and cd inside the Go Bookstore. And now, since we are here, we'll have to install a couple of packages, right? So before we install packages, we'll have to create a go.mod file, which will store all the packages. It's almost like the package.json file if you are from a Node.js background, right? So it contains all our packages that we'll be using in this project. So we'll first do go mod init, and even if you're not storing right now inside a GitHub account, I just recommend you use github.com and / your name or any other name, and then / the name of the project, which is Bookstore. This gives us like a relative route or an absolute route based on which we can include and import different files into our main.go file. So it has created our go.mod file. Okay, and now we'll start importing the packages that we need. So the first package that I need is the GORM package, which will help me to interact with my database. Jinzu /GORM. So Jinzu is the name of the guy, I think, who's created GORM. So we have added GORM, and now more specifically, I need the MySQL package inside GORM, because GORM is an ORM, right? It helps for Golang, and it helps you to interact with SQLite and Postgres. But for this example, we need MySQL, so we're going to go ahead and install that. And then we need to install the Gorilla Mux package, since we need to use that for our routes. So I'm going to say go get github.com/gorilla /mux. So we have installed Gorilla Mux as well. Now, as per my knowledge, these are the 3 packages that we will require, but as we go along, I might find that we need more packages. So it's not a problem. We'll install them as we go ahead. So from what I see, what we'll be building right now, I think these 3 should be enough probably. So let's get started with the actual code now that we have our packages in our Go mod file. Go mod file also helps us to go build, which will create the build or the exe file, which we'll execute on our machine. Exe if you have Windows, and .deb if you have basically it's a binary file if you have Ubuntu. And so we're going to go ahead and open up our VS Code editor. So I'll say code and space dot, and that will open up my code editor. So as you can see, I'm inside my VS Code window, and now I'll start creating the folders that we had seen in the diagram. And you may have noticed that there's a time delay between when I switch between my Google Chrome and my VS Code and my PowerShell or my terminal. And that's because I'm using OBS to record these videos, and it's not very user friendly in terms of helping you switch between the tabs very easily. So kindly bear with me. So let's start creating the folders quickly. As I'd shown you in the diagram, we have a CMD folder and we have a PKG folder, right? These are the two main folders. Inside our CMD folder, we'll have a main folder, and inside the main folder, we'll have our main.go file where all the magic will happen. Right, the main controller, the main control of our entire project. And then inside the package folder, we have config, and we have our controllers. Then we have, so I think by mistake what I've done is I've created controllers inside config. So I have controllers, and then I have models, and then I have routes and utils, right? Routes and utils. So as you'd seen just a second back that I had created controllers inside config by mistake. That's a very common mistake, by the way, and that will happen to you if you're not very careful. So please make sure that inside your package folder, all of these different folders are at the same level inside the package folder, right? They're not inside one another. Yeah, that's a very common mistake, by the way. So let's start creating our files. Inside config, we have app.go. Inside our controller, by the way, in the diagram, I'd already shown you the name of the files as well. So we have controller.go, and then inside models, we have our book.go file, and inside our routes, we'll have bookstore routes.go. Okay. And inside our utils, the name of the file will just be utils.go. Now, you know, there's so many files right here. So we need a strategy on where to begin and where to end the program at. So how do we start coding? How do we begin this whole journey of writing so much code, right? It can be confusing, it can be daunting, it can be overwhelming many times. So that's why I have a small strategy for you that will help you understand everything really well. What I'll do is I'll start with the routes. So I'll create the routes first, and that will help you visualize the routes where the users will hit, you know, from their front end or from their postman. The user will hit on those routes, right? So we'll start with the routes, and then what we'll do is we'll then write our app.go file, which will help us to connect with our MySQL database. Then we'll create our utils file. So app.go, which is the config file, and utils files are very small files, so they won't confuse you too much. And the routes file is also very small. And then we'll create our main.go file. The main.go file, all it will do is it will just tell Golang that here in bookstore.routes is where all my routes reside. So all these files will be really small. Then we'll create our models file, which will be slightly bigger, and then our book controller will have a lot of code. So we'll tackle it at the end, because after the routes, the control will go to each of the functions in book controller file. So this is the book controller is what we'll tackle at the end. And before that, you'll get a little bit of an idea of what we're building, so things won't be very confusing for you. That's what I'm at least attempting to do. So as you can see, I've started coding here. I've written package routes, and then I've started importing the packages that I'll be needing. Since this is my routes file, the one package that I most definitely need is Gorilla Mux, which will help me to create the routes in the first place. And the other package that I need is not really a package, but I need my controller file here. So first just see what this is, and I'll try to explain to you what's happening. So I'll say akhil/go bookstore /pkg and /controllers. So this will help me import my controllers folder, and in turn the file inside the controllers folder as well, right? Now, if you're from a Node.js background, you will be very confused when you look at this, right? So this is an absolute path, whereas with Node.js, you're used to something like this, right? So you'll say controllers, and that's because routes and controllers are both in the same package called pkg. So you would say that, okay, I just want to import controllers, so I'll just say like this, right? But that's not how it works with Golang. Golang has absolute paths. And once you get used to Golang, you'll understand that that's kind of the right, even if it looks lengthy, but that's kind of the right way to do things, right? Because the github.com/akhil/go bookstore till here is the path that we created, which was like the absolute path that we created for our project when we were initiating the Go mod file, if you remember. And package.controllers is where, we'll come inside package, and then we'll come inside controllers is where the controllers file lies, and that's what we want to use. So it may take you a while to get used to this absolute routing, but once you get used to it, I'm telling you, you won't go back. So I am a Node.js developer. I was a Node.js developer, I can say, for a very long time, but once I started using Golang, I can tell you there is no going back, right? Because Golang is so much better. So you have register bookstore. So I want to create a function called register bookstore routes, and this function will have basically all my routes, and the routes will help me to get the control to my controller, which is where I'll have the meat of the logic. So I'll have router mux.router, right? And here is where, in this function is where I'll create my handlers. So router.handle func, right? So if somebody comes to my /book/, right, so I'll say controllers.create book. So I'd shown you the create book function, right, in the diagram. I have not written the function till now, but I'll be writing this function in the controllers file. And this is why I needed my controllers package on top, controllers file on top, right? Because if somebody hits the book route, I want my controllers.createBook function to handle it, and the method is going to be post here because I'm trying to create a new book. So I'm sure that's very clear. And then we'll create another handle func, and it will again be /book/, but this time I want it to say get book. It'll get the list of all books for me. And the method in this case, as you know, will be get. So on top, by mistake, I had put 2h for methods. I removed one of those. So just make sure you don't make any typos or any spelling mistakes. Then we have another handle func where we will handle, as you had seen in the diagram before the this coding part started, we'll have /book, and inside this we'll have our book ID, right? And then you have controllers dot get book by ID, right? So that's the function. I want to get one book by ID, and dot methods, the method would be get in this case. All right, so I think all clear till now. Now we want to create the two more routes. They will be same, /book and /book ID will be there, but they will be our put and delete functions, right? So I'll say router.handle func, sorry, and here also I think the U is capital, it should be a small u. And then you have /book/book ID. And then we'll say inside my controllers file, I'll have a function called update book. Okay, and then the method for this will be put. And similarly for our delete route as well, book/book ID, and we'll have controllers dot delete book dot methods, and we'll have the delete method here, right? So far all looks great, right? Everything is working out pretty fine for now. So we have written our routes package. So if you've reached this far, then you should be proud of yourself, I think. So now, like I promised you, we'll write the app.go file, which is inside the config folder, right? And so we'll come here and we'll give it the name config, sorry, it's not capital, package config. All right, and here I want to import just two of my packages, and they will both be related to talking to MySQL. So the first package will be jinzoo/gorm, which is my ORM, And the second package will be the more specific one, which is github.com/jinzu/gorm/dialects/mysql. So if you go and look at the documentation for the gorm package, you will notice this blank character here, and then space, and then the link, right? So just make sure you do that as well. So once we have imported these two packages, the MySQL package and the gorm package, now is the time to create a variable called db. So the whole point of this file will be to return a variable called db, which will help the other files to interact with the db, right? So we'll say star gorm.db, and then we'll create a connect function. The connect function helps us to open a connection with our database, and the database in this case, as you know, is MySQL database, right? So we'll have d comma err. If there isn't, so I'll write some statement here, and then if there's an error, the error will come inside err. If there's no error and the database connection has opened, it will come inside d, right? So I'll be able to access the connection using d. So I'll say gorm.open, which will help me open up my connection with the database, right? And here I'll write something. So I'll say the name of the database that I want to use, MySQL, because Gorm helps me, as I had said, talk to SQLite and Postgres as well. But in my case, I want to use MySQL. And here I'll say the name of the user and my password and my the name of my table, simple rest, and then we'll write some little lines here which are required by MySQL. So if there is an error, right, which means that if error not equal to null, which means that if there is an error, so we'll say panic err, and here we'll say db is equal to d, right? So whatever was in d here that we received, we'll transfer that to now db variable, and we'll have a get db function which we'll use in other files, and it just returns db. So like I had said, the purpose of this file is to return a db variable that will help us to talk to the database. Other files can talk to database easily. Now as you can see, I have not written some code ahead of this part, right? So for MySQL to connect, we have to write some things after my username, my password, and the name of the table. So that needs to be char set is equal to utf-8. Just make sure you copy this exactly, and you have parse time is equal to true. So this is some requirement by MySQL, right? So you have location is equal to local, right? So these few lines you have to write, and then your app.go file is complete. Now the next code that we'll be writing will be our utils.go file. So when we start writing our book controller, we will be using we'll need data that is unmarshaled data. So we'll receive some request from the user, right? And it will be in JSON, but we'll need to unmarshal it to be able to use it in our controller. So we just need to write one very small code here to be able to unmarshal the JSON that we'll receive from the request. So it's going to be very simple. We're going to call it utils, package utils, and we'll import a couple of packages. One is called encoding/JSON, right? The other is called io/ioutil, and the third is called net/http, right? And here is where I'll create my function, and the function is called parse body. That will help me to parse the body, especially in the create function, in the sense when I'm trying to create a book, in the create book function in my controllers, I will receive some body in the request, right? So I need to parse that body because that body will be in JSON, so I need to be able to unmarshal it. So I'm just creating one small function to do that, right? So I get the request and a pointer to it, and I take that in R. So I'll be able to use R to access the request that I've received from the user. And I'm sure you know what a request is. Request has that body that we are sending of the book, right? And then you have X and you have interface. So I'm sure you know basics of how interfaces work. So we'll say body and error is equal to ioutil dot read all. All we're doing is just reading the body, right? And if there is no error, so error double equal to nil, then we'll say error is equal to JSON dot, then we'll start unmarshalling it basically. Unmarshal, there's a single L, right? And we'll say byte and body, comma, after body you say comma X. So just one thing, guys, the X is a small x, not a capital X. By mistake I had written here capital X, just make sure of that. And then error not equal to nil, and then we'll just return, right? So even this looks like it's complete, right? And so your utils file is complete and your bookstore routes file is complete. Now we want to start concentrating on our app.go file. Yeah, sorry, the app.go file is also complete. So now we want to start concentrating on our models file, right? Which is slightly more advanced. So, but let's start anyways, right? So we have package models, we'll call it. And then we're going to import, as you know, we'll import our GORM package first, github.com/jinzu/GORM. And there's one more thing that we need to install or import, and that will be my config file that I just created, right? Because the config file helps me to connect with my database, so I need that here. So I'll say github.com/bookstore/pkg and /config, right? So let me just be sure that, yeah, so the routes required controllers and the app.go file required GORM and the models required config. Yeah, so I think, yeah, so we're on the right track. So we'll create a database, the variable called db, gorm.db. You have seen this already in the config file. And we'll create a struct called book. Now structs basically are based on models, and a model is something that gives us a structure to help us store something in the database. So in this case we'll have name, because every single book will have a name, right? And then you put these two backticks. Inside that you say GORM, then you say JSON name, then you say author, and you say string again. So name of type string and author of type string, and then you say GORM, sorry, you'll say JSON, and you'll say here author, okay, and then you'll say publication and string, backticks again, JSON again, and publication. So let me read through it and make sure everything is fine. GORM, JSON, all right, author and publication, right? Name, author and publication. So we have three things. And so usually almost always you will find this, that we have to whenever we are working with databases, we have to init our database. So if you've seen the Golang to-do list video that I've created a few days back, you must have noticed that init function. So here also we need to have an init function that will help us to initialize the database in the first place. So config.connect, this is the function that we created together just some time back, where which is the connect function, which helps us to connect with the database. That's inside the config folder. You know that already. And db is equal to, so whatever we get from that config file by calling the getDB function, which we have created together just some time back, getDB function inside app.go. As you can see, this is your getDB function, which returns just the DB, which we had connected to the DB, right? And so that's what you get here inside DB. So here also you have a DB variable where you're just storing the DB that you get back from the config file, right? So till now, I think everything should be highly clear, and then we'll just auto migrate it with a book, an empty book. Okay. So all good till now. Now, the control first is in the routes, right here in the routes, and then the routes basically give the control to the controllers, and the controllers will give the control to the book.go, which is basically the models, right? So that's how the flow works. In the sense, the user interacts with the routes, and the routes send control to the controllers, where we have all our logic, which we'll write in some time, and the controllers then have to perform some operations with the database. Now the operations with the database have to reside inside our models file, which is book.go in this case. So that means we'll have to have a different function for the different controllers that we create. So we need to have a create book function here. We need to have a get all books, get book by ID, and delete book. So we need to have all these different functions here, right? So now we have two options. One is that I start creating those functions directly, or I create the main.go file, and then that will give you more clarity, and then we'll create the functions that are required for database, right? So I think I'll create the main.go file so that you have a little more clarity. So let's go on main.go file, and then we'll come back to the book.go file as well. Now so we have one more option. One is that I start creating the controllers, and then once we are writing the function in the controllers, then I'll start creating the model functions. But that may confuse you, so that's why I want to create the model level functions first, which talk to the database, right? And then we'll have a corresponding function to that in the controllers. So that I feel, at least from my opinion, that will make things very easy for you. So anyways, let's write out our package main file. Inside our package main file, we'll import log, because I want to log out if there's any error. We'll have nest/hdp. So as I told you earlier, that in our main file, all we're going to do is we're going to create the server, right? Which will also define our local host. That's the first thing that we'll do. The second thing that we'll do is we'll tell Golang where our routers reside. So basically, all that main.go file will do is tell that bookstore.routes has our routes. So please look there, because I don't want to write all my routes in the main.go file, right? So that means I need my Gorilla Mux package here, /mux. Sorry, there's slash here. And then I need my MySQL package here, github.com/jinzu/gorm/dialects/MySQL. And then there's something else I need here. I need to import the routes, right? So I know that the routes is inside package folder, and inside that is routes folder. So I need to again use my absolute path, which will be github.com/akhil/go bookstore/package/routes. So let me make sure if in my so here also it's correct, package/config, right? So so we have go bookstore/package/routes. So we need the routes here, like I said. And now you know that inside a main.go file you always have func main. So let's create the func main, which will basically have mux.new router. So we're creating a R variable which will initialize the router here. And we'll say routes.register bookstore routes, and we'll pass R to it. So if you remember, in our routes, we have a function called as register bookstore routes. Here it is, register bookstore routes. And we are passing the router to it, R, which is the router that we just created inside main.go file. We're passing it to it. And then we are handling the functions using, as you know, controllers functions, right? So the R that we're passing here becomes router, right, which is of type mux.router. So I hope everything makes sense now. If there was a confusion earlier, then I'm sure everything is making a lot of sense now. So http.handle comma R, right, and then we'll say log.fatal. So like, since this is a slightly big project in terms of different files and project structure, so it's very important to know what's the order in which you want to build the files, right? So if I would go in the order that's comfortable to me, then you might get confused, and so that's why I'm having to pick an order which will make a lot of sense to you, right? So you'll have listen and serve, which helps us create the server in the first place, right? And these brackets, I'll say localhost 9010 and comma R. So by now I'm sure you know that listen and serve is a function that helps us create a server, and we pass to it this, which is the port or the address on which we want to start the server, and it's inside the HTTP package which we have here, right? So, and if there's an error, it's going to say log, it's going to just log it out, right? So that's our main.go file. Now let's come back to our models file, which is book.go. So I'm going to start creating all the functions that I need to talk to my database. Things might look very, I won't say very, but things might look a little confusing to you right now. But when we'll finish writing our book controller file, it will make a lot of sense to you. So from the routes, the data, the control goes to the controllers, like I said, and in the controllers, there will be different functions that I've shown you in the diagram that will have create book and get book by ID, get books, right? All of those functions will be there. And then those functions will again, in order to connect with the database, in order to make changes in the database, they have to go through these models, right? So we have to write these model functions, and that's what I'm creating right now out here. We can do this, like I said, after we create the controllers as well, but it may get confusing for you. So that's why I want to write these right now. So we'll have a create book function. And we have something called as a DB, right, which we have created here on top, DB. So DB is what helps us to talk to the database. So db.new record. Now new record is a function that exists inside Gorm. That's why we're using Gorm, because we don't have to write those queries for MySQL. The query part Gorm will write, which is an ORM, which helps us to talk to the database. We have to write these simple functions like create a new record, those kind of things, right? So we'll say db.create $b, right? Where B is something that we'll receive, which will be of type book, right? And what we're going to return is also of type book. So that's why we have a star here, book here. So we are going to return B of type book, right? So we receive something of type book, which is B. So we create that. And then we also return that same book that we created. So that's why we have star book out here as well. Now I want to create the get all books function. That will help me create all books, so return all the books that I have in my database. And here we'll have var books. Now I'm using a slice here because I want to return a slice or a list of the books that I have in my database, right? So we'll create a variable which is books, which is of type slice book, where B is capital. Just make sure B is capital. And then all you have to do is db.find books, and then you return books, right? So you're returning the list of books, which is slice, right? Now I want to create a function for getting a book by ID. So that means it needs to take an ID first, obviously that's very clear, which will be of int 64. There's no space between int and 64, my bad. And So these two things I've written, startbook and startgom.db. Don't worry about that right now. I'll explain to you as we go along. So we have var get book of type book, okay, and db is equal to db dot where, w is capital by the way, and id equal to id. Right, so we are basically running a where command in MySQL where we are saying that where id is equal to id, right? Then find that book, find and get book. So not only are we going to just return the book that we found right now from the database, but we're also going to return the db variable as well. So that's why we have the book that we're returning, get by id, the book that we're returning with that particular id in our database, and we're also returning the db variable that we had created, which was of type gorm.db, right? And then we have a delete function, func delete book. id again is int 64 and there is book before it, var book of type book. So db dot where helps us to find the book with the id which I've just shown you some time back, question mark comma id, right? So in get book by id, I had taken id where d was small. Now in this case I'm taking id where d is capital, and then I'll say dot delete in bracket book, and then I'm just going to return the book. So these are all the database functions I have. Now here there will be a big doubt for you. You will be wondering, why is there no update function? Why don't we have an update function? Because in this video, the way update will happen in the controller will be that we'll find the book, the ID that you will send as the from the user, that the ID that we'll receive. So we'll find that book first, and then we'll delete that particular book, and then the new data that the user has sent us to be updated. So we'll use that to update the book and create basically a new data. So we don't have an update function as such in our models. We're just going to use get and delete and then post create. Basically we're going to use a combination of those three to update a file in our database. So it may sound confusing to you right now, but once we build our controller file, everything will make a lot of sense, right? So let's start building our controller. So we have package controllers, and then we're going to import the packages that we need. So I know that I want to use encoding/json package, and the other packages that I need, I'm just making sure that the video is still recording because OBS has a lot of problems. And then I want to use the FMT package because I want to print out things to the console. Then I have my github.com Gorilla Mux that I want to use, .com/gorilla/mux that I want to use, right? And I want to use my net/http package. I want to use string convert package, and I also want to use, now I want to import my utils and my models. So both my utils and my models are inside my package folder. So you know how to do that, right? github.com/akhil/go bookstore/pkg/utils, right? And then github.com/akhil/go bookstore/pkg/models. So I have both my utils and my models, right? Now we'll create new book, which is a variable of type models.book, right? So in our model file, which is book.go, we have created a struct of type book, right? And that's what we have been using all this while. So of type book is what we are creating here. We're creating new book of type book, right? So model, when I say model, I'm referring to the models, sorry, with an S. I'm referring to my models file, and I'm referring to the struct inside the book, struct book call inside my models file, right? So new book is of type book, which is a struct, and which has all these different things. It has a name, an author, and publication, right? And it's called new book. I'm explaining to you this slowly because controllers is where people get confused, right? So first, so here we have our 5 functions, which is get books and create book and get book by ID and update and delete. So the strategy that we'll follow here will be that we'll create the get books function first, because that's the most easy in my from my perspective at least. At least what I think is the get books function is the easiest, so we'll build that first. So whenever you're building a function, a controller function, you know that you have 2 things. You have a response writer and a request. For request, you put a pointer to the request that you receive from the user, and then so we have a request in R and our response in W. So whenever the response that we'll send to the user will be with W, so we'll have to return W basically. And then we'll have new books models dot get all books. Now the model functions may not have made any sense to you, but here it will make sense, because what we're trying to do here is we have new books, and in that we'll store models dot get all books. So models dot get all books is this function that we just created together, models dot get all books, right, which will just basically find all the books and send a list of the books back to the user, right? So now back in our books controller, we have a list of books inside new books, and then we want to have a response json.marshal new books. So we want to convert it into JSON, right? Whatever we see from our database. So that's why I use the Marshal function. And then we'll use, in the header, we want to say content type, comma, pkg/json w dot write header http dot status okay. Okay, so basically it will give us a 200. Status okay means it gives us a 200, and then we say w dot write, which is the main thing now, which helps us to send something to the front end or to Postman, which is the response. The response is basically a JSON version of new books that we found from the database. So we're just going to write a response, which will basically be a JSON, right? And the list of the books that we found in our database. That's all it is. And now the second easy function, in my opinion, is get book by ID. So let's create that as well. So func get book by ID w http dot response writer and comma r http dot request. All right. So we'll get access to our R, which is our request, right? So inside our request, obviously, will be the book ID, right? So we want to access our request, and we want to access the book ID inside our request. So book ID is equal to vars and book ID. So we'll have string conversion dot parse int book ID comma 0 comma 0. So we just want to make sure that the book ID that we've received, that could be in string, right? Mostly it's a string, and we're just passing it to int using the string conversion package that we have imported here. And if there is an error not equal to nil, we'll have fmt.println error while parsing. That's what we'll return. And then we'll have book details, comma, the blank character. We'll say models dot get book by ID. and ID, right? So we are getting get book by ID, models.get book by ID, right? Which is a function that we created together, if you remember. Let me take you to the models file and show you. So inside the models file, inside book.go, we have get book by ID. So we'll be returning two different things, like, we'll be returning the book and we'll be returning the DB variable, right? And since I don't want to use the DB variable right now, so that's why I'm using the blank character here, because I don't want to use it. In Golang, if you don't want to use something, it's better to use the blank character, because if you define something and don't use it, Golang is going to give you a big error. So just make sure you use the blank character here, right? So yeah, so I'm going to get book by ID. I'm going to get that inside my book details variable, right? And now I want to start thinking about the response that I want to send to my user, which will be very simple. It will be just json.marshall and book details. So to my user, I have to send a JSON response, right? Because I get something from my database, I have to convert it into JSON, and then I want to send that to my user, right? So that's why I have to marshal it into JSON. So now let's start creating my header that I want to set, and it will be of type, so it will be content type, it will be of type JSON, and w.write header http.status OK, and then you have your w.write response. Okay, so I hope this is making sense till now. So inside our write header, we are sending status OK, which is 200, that everything worked fine, and we are sending the response. And inside the response, inside res, which is the response, we just have a JSON version of the book details, basically the book that we found in our database based on the ID, right? So I'm sure all of that is making sense. If things are not making sense to you, then you just watch this video slower, or you just type it out with me, just code along with me. I hope you're coding along, but maybe once more you can code along, and then things will start becoming clearer to you. And if you still don't understand, then you can just put a comment in the comment box below for the video, and then I can probably help you out. So you have your response writer, comma r is your http.request. So this is a quite long video, right? So if you've reached this far, then you should be really proud of yourself. Models.book. Right, so utils.parse body. Now we'll receive something from the user, right, as a request, and now we want to parse that into so we're getting that in JSON. We want to parse that into something that our database will understand. So that's why we are using parse body, which is a function that we created together inside the utils file, right? So we're going to say r comma create book. All right, and then we'll say b is equal to create book dot create book. So create book, right, is a model of type inside the models you have books, right? So create book is of type that, basically. And then when we say create book dot create book, so I'm referring to the create book function here, this one, that's what I'm referring to out here. Okay, so we'll have create book dot create book, and then I now have to start thinking about my response. My response will be json dot marshall inside that I pass b. So b is something that was returned to me by my create book function inside models. So let's look at what it's returning to us. So it's returning to me the same model that is same object or same record that it just created inside the database. So it created something inside the database, and it's just returning to me the same exact thing So that's what I have access to, which is B in this case. So it's basically the same book that was sent to me by my user as a request, right? So in the response, I'm just going to convert that into JSON. So from in the beginning, we received JSON and then we parsed it into something that the database would understand. We sent it to the database. The database sent us that same record, and then that record we are converting that into JSON right now to be able to send that to our user, to Postman basically. So we'll say w dot write header, and then we'll say http dot status okay w dot write, and we're just going to write our response to the Postman, right? So create book was also I feel quite straightforward. Now we'll work on the delete book function. Func delete book. So which will have w http dot. So let me just check if the video is still recording. I'm not sure. Yeah, it seems like it's still recording. Anyhow, so in our delete book function, so as you are seeing right now that all of these functions are talking to another function inside our models, right? So similarly with delete book, we'll be talking to the delete book function inside our model, which is book.go. So let's have response writer and comma r, which will have a pointer to the http dot request that we'll get from the user. And then we'll use vars again to be able to access the request that we've received from the user. And now we want to access the book ID. Where's book ID, right? And then we have our error. So string convert. So basically, if you have not understood by now, we are doing the exact same steps that we were doing in the get book by ID. So because we need to access the request, then we need to access the book ID, then we need to convert that into int, which we'll do by string convert.parseInt package, and then we'll also print out the error if there was some error, right, while parsing. So we're doing the exact same steps. There's nothing new here. Parse int and book ID comma 0 comma 0. And if there is an error, which means if error is not equal to nil, then we'll say fmt dot println, and here we'll say error while parsing. All right, so that's great till now. And then we'll have book is equal to models dot delete book ID. So you know this function, right? Delete book, which we have created together in the models file, delete book. It takes an ID and it just deletes the book and then returns the book that it just deleted, right? So the book that has been just returned to us will be inside the book variable. All right. Now we have to start thinking about the response and how we have to send it to our user inside Postman. So we'll say json.marshal, the book that we received from our database function, right? Now that needs to be converted into JSON. So, and now we'll start creating our header, and we'll set our header content type comma pkg application slash JSON w start write header http dot status okay w dot write, and we'll send the response. The last three steps are the same for almost all functions. There's nothing new there. Now there's only one function left to go, which is obviously the people find it the most complicated function, which will be the update function, and it will have some aspects of all of the different functions that we have seen till now. It's also the biggest function. So update book is the biggest function, and let's get started. I mean, that's why I always covered the update function at the end, because it can be confusing to people. So that's why we have already seen delete book, create book, get book by ID, and it will just have a combination of all of these functions, right? So let's create the update book function where U is capital and B is capital, w http dot response writer, comma R, which will be http.request. Right, so all good till here, no confusions. So we have update book, which is of models dot book, very similar to our create book, right? The same code we're writing out here. Utils dot parse body. So whatever you've sent in your request as the new body to be updated into database for that same ID, that's what we're going to parse, and we're going to take from JSON into a we're going to unmarshal it into a format that Golang understands and the database understands. So that's what we have done here. Now we want to get our ID, which is vars is equal to mux dot vars. So like I said, it's a mixture of the post, the create book function and the get by ID function, right? So book ID is equal to vars, and we get access to book ID. So till here, we wrote some code from the create book function, and here we have started writing some code from the get book by ID function, right? The same thing, the same part we have to repeat here. So ID, comma, ARR. I'm not going to copy and paste it because I always encourage you to write everything so that you get very, very comfortable with the code, right? Parse int and book ID, comma, 0, comma, 0. And if there is an error, which is error not equal to nil, then we're going to print out fmt.println say error while parsing, right? So completely the same till here, right? This whole part is exactly the same. And these two lines I guess showed you is the same from create book. So till now I think there's nothing confusing at all. So now let's get the book by ID, right? So we need to find that book, if that book even exists in our database. Only then we'll update it, right? So let's find that book. Book details db equal to models dot get book by ID, and we'll pass capital ID there. If update book dot name is not equal to empty string, it's not empty, then book details dot name is equal to update book dot name. Okay, so let me type all this out and then explain to you what all this means. And if update book dot author is not equal to empty, then book details dot author is equal to update book dot author, right? And then if update book dot publication is not equal to empty string, then book details dot publication is equal to update book dot publication. So in our book model, as you had seen, there are three things, right? Name, author, publication. So when we have to create a new book, right, then while creating that new book, you'll have to have these three fields: name, author, and publication. So we are assuming here in our controllers that the request that we'll get from the user, it will have all these three properties: name, author, and publication. So we'll take the request that we got from the user inside update book, and we have parsed it, right? So it should be utils dot, yeah, so this is a big mistake here that I've made. It should be utils dot parse body and not just parse. Make sure you update that as well, right? So let me check if everywhere else I have not made that, anywhere else I've not made that same mistake. Yeah, I've not. So it's parse body, utils dot parse body, and Everything else looks to be all right. Okay, so we're assuming that that update body after parsing has three things: name, author, and publication. So we found that we found that book from inside the database using getBookById function, because we have whenever we call the update function, we pass the ID and we pass the new body with the new details which need to be set inside the database now. So we'll have name, author, and publication, and for book details, right, we need to start setting those three things. So now book details is something that we get from our models.getBookById. So getBookById, by passing the ID, we get a book back in return, and now we are setting the details for that particular book object, right? So we set book details.name. Now that will become equal to the new name that we have sent as part of the request that we had also passed, right? And the author will also now become equal to the author of the update book, which is basically the request. Inside that we have passed an author, so that will become the new author. And similarly, the publication will also become the new publication. So all of that detail is now inside the book details record, which we now want to save in our database, right? So since we have updated it, now we want to just save it. So updating is taking place inside our Golang. It's not taking place anywhere else. So we just found it by ID. We now updated all the details, and we're just going to go ahead and save it again. Right. So .save book details. Now we want to send some response to our user. As you know, it has to be in JSON. So we're going to send the book details, which we just updated, right? So with the updated things, it's going to go to the user. So header and .set content type, comma, pjkeylation slash JSON. Then we w.write header http.status OK and w.write response. So we've even sent the response to the user, and so we have written our update function, delete function, create book, get book by ID, and get books. So I think all of the work is complete. So now let me just go between all my files and see. So main.go file is complete, config file is complete, controller is complete, models are complete, routes are complete, and utils are complete. So all of this makes sense, and now it's time to start testing and start fixing if we get any errors or bugs, and also to check how to work with these APIs in our Postman. So let's head over to Postman. So we are back in our terminal because now we want to start trying to run that code that we have written, the entire bookstore API. So as you can see, I'm inside my Google Bookstore folder, right? And it has CMDN package. You can see that. I want to go inside my CMD package, and it has a main folder. So I want to go inside my main folder. This has that main.go file. Now main.go file is the file that we need to be able to run the go build command. If you run the go build command anywhere else, it won't run because it needs the main.go file. Now when you run go space build, I'm expecting to see a lot of errors, right? And you don't have to worry if you see the errors, because that's a part and parcel of being a developer. So you will have to get used to solving those errors that you get. So as soon as I press go build, it's going to give me some errors. So right now it's giving me only one error, but once I solve this error, I know there will be many more errors, right? So right now it's saying that in book.go file at line number 11, it cannot refer gordon.model. So I kind of know where the error is. Now I'm not going to edit all of this out. You're going to solve the errors with me so that you become better as a developer. So you can identify. So it's saying book.go file, and at line number 11 it's going to say gone.model is not there. So all I had to do was put a capital M here, and now it won't give me the same error again, or so I expect. So if I say go build again, it's giving me, like I told you, so this error is sorted, but it's just giving me so many more errors, right? So the first error it's saying is it cannot refer to unexported name mux.vars. So let's head over to line number 47 in our Go book controller. Line number 47. Yeah, so vars, vars has to be capital V, right? So that's why it's not able to access. So we'll say capital V, and that error should at least go away, right? So this error will go away. And then it says label book ID defined and not used, which is line number 64. So yes, it's saying defined but not used because I missed the is equal to sign here. And I have a feeling that all of the other errors, because they are much later into this same function, so till line 80, till line number 80, from 65 to 80, I'm seeing all these errors, and I have a feeling that they're all because of this is equal to sign that I'd missed. So now I'm going to go ahead and go build again, and let's see if there are any more errors. Yeah, so there are more errors. It's saying go 71.3 undefined book details. So let's find out. So these errors are on line 71, 74, 77, and 79 and 80. Let's look into the code. What could be the issue here? So 71, 74, and all of these lines. And the error basically saying that book details is not defined. So I can see here that I've written books by mistake and not book details. So once I fix that, I remove that extra S. Hopefully these errors should go away, and there could be more errors. No, so there are no new errors. When I ran go build, there were no new errors, and it created this main file here for me. And now I can start to run this code, and I can start showing you from Postman. So you can say go run main dot go. It won't say anything. That means that it's started running on your Postman. So now let's head over to our Postman, and I'll show you how to work with each of these APIs that we. I've opened up my Postman window. So Postman is a tool that helps us to test all the APIs. If you don't know what Postman is, you can go ahead and watch any video from YouTube. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a collection here, and I'm going to call it bookstore. My server is still running. So inside my bookstore collection, I have to create a request, and I'll call it get all. All right. And then I have a request called create. Then I have get by ID. I'll have update, and finally I'll have delete. So for get all, I need localhost 9010 where this project is running, and slash book slash. Okay, and if I get all, I get an empty array, and if this is what you get, then your server is working perfectly fine. You're getting the right result, because right now we don't have any books, so we get an empty array, right? And so that's why if we don't have any books, we have to create the book in the first place. So we'll create the book using the post or create, right? So we'll say book slash, and then we'll use the post method. We'll send some body. Now remember, in the body you have to send JSON, and JSON will have 3 fields. One is name, the other is author, and the third is make sure you get the spellings of author and name and publication right. Third is publication. So name of the book is 0 to 1, and author is Peter Thiel. Publication is Penguin, I think. So you send it, and you get a response, which basically shows us that everything is fine. And we get status 200 OK, which we have only sent. We wrote it right in the code. That is that header, status OK. And let's create another book. Let's call it The Startup Way by Eric Ries. And I don't know what the name of the publication is. So I've created 2 different books.
By the way, both of these books are amazing. If you're planning to start your own company, I highly recommend you read these books. And so when we run the get all API again, it works perfectly fine, right? We get both the books that are there in our database. And now let's get by ID. So we have one book with ID 3, and we get that 0 to 1, and one book with ID 4, and we get that as well. Perfect. Now we'll update the book by which has the ID 4, and for the body I'm going to again select raw JSON, and I'm going to simply copy and paste this here, and let's change the publication to Orion. So it's updated the book, and now the publication should have been Orion. Oh, sorry, I have to write put here. The publication will become Orion, right? So don't forget to change the methods here, right? And for create, the method was post, and for update it is put, right? I hope that makes sense. Now we can go ahead and delete this book, and for that I'll need the delete method in my Postman. So when I send that, the the book is gone, hopefully. So now there's only one book remaining, which has an ID 3, which is basically 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. So all our 5 APIs working perfectly fine. And if you've completed this video and you have been able to code out till this far, congratulations. In this video, we're building something very interesting. We're building a Slack bot that calculates age using Golang. Without any delays, let's get started. So the prerequisites to this video are that you should have a Slack account, right? Obviously, that's how you'll build a Slack bot, right? So you should have a Slack account. You should have a workspace in your Slack, and you should be the admin of that workspace. Only then you'll be able to build a bot, right, in Slack. And then you have to come to this link, api.slack.com/apps, and this is where we'll be able to start our apps. So I'll say create new app, and ask me 2 different questions from scratch or from an app manifest. So in this case, I'll be building a bot from scratch. I'll call it the age bot, right? And I'll give it my workspace. And now we have to find socket mode. On the left, it's a third button on the left, right? Socket mode, and we have to enable it. And we'll call it socket token. So this will generate an app token for us, XAPP. So when it says XAPP, it is your app token, and when it says XOB, it's your bot token, right? XOXB, it'll be your bot token. So you can make a note of this. You can copy this. I won't copy it right now. I'll come back for it later on in the video. So this is that was your app token. And now let's go for our event subscriptions, which is the third button, the fourth button from the last, right? And we have to enable our event subscriptions. We have to subscribe to bot events, and let's add some events, right? So events are basically something that our bot would be subscribed to. So these are socket events. So I'll say app mention whenever somebody mentions my bot, and I'll say message history, and I'll say message.im, right? It can read messages. And then messages.channel, messages.mpim, right? So these are the events that I think my bot would need to be subscribed to. But then there's always, you can always come back and tweak them later on if you, by mistake, if you leave out any, and you can always, this is mostly, you'll get these by trial and error. Right, so I've built more than 50 Slack bots, so I know, and this is a tip for you as well, that it's always better to add more events than less, because and also now what we'll do is we'll add OAuths and permissions. So come to this option above event subscriptions. So OAuth and permissions, also you have to add some permissions like scopes to your bot. These are all very similar to your event subscriptions. So here also it's always recommended with event subscriptions and with OAuth and permissions, it's recommended that you add more than you need, because most of the errors that you'll face when building Slack bots would be around your bot not having enough permissions or authorizations or authentication. Those will be the kind of errors that you'll face. So it's better to always add these so that you don't have to deal with a lot of errors right later on. So I'll just add some regarding chat write, and let's say channels read, right? And then say I am read and I am write, These are direct IAMs are basically direct messages. MP-IAM read and MP-IAM write. Also, I'll add. Right, and I don't think I need any more permissions for now. But if I have any errors, then I'll come back here and I'll add those permissions, right? And the problem with building Slack bots is sometimes you don't even get an error, and your bot doesn't respond properly, and it doesn't give you the behavior that you're expecting it to give you, and those problems are mostly revolving around scopes, right? So there are so many errors on Stack Overflow when you go, and you won't find answers to those problems because most of them are around scopes. Those aren't even errors. Like people would be saying, my Slack bot isn't working and those kind of issues, right? So those are all around scopes. I can tell you that from experience. Anyhow, what we'll do now is we'll actually click on install this to workspace, and it'll ask me for some permissions. I'll say allow. So that means now AgeBot is installed to my workspace. And it has given me a bot user auth token, right? So I need to make a copy of this as well. So now what we'll do is, since we have our credentials in place, now it's time to actually start building the bot in Golang, right? So I'm in my directory where I keep most of my Golang code, and I'm going to create a directory for this particular project called Slack AgeBot. Sorry for the wrong spelling of age. And I'm going to go inside this directory, and here what I'm going to say is I'm going to go mod init github.com/akhil/slack. I'll say Slack AgeBot is the name of the project. So this is an absolute link that helps me to import other files in my project. And in this particular project, we don't have multiple files. We are going to only get to have the main.go file. But if this was a bigger project, then this would have been very, very helpful. And also using github.com, helps a lot, because later on, if you have to push this to GitHub and then use it as a package in your own project later on, or somebody else has to use it as a package in their project, it's very, very useful. So this is a best practice. You can always init your Go programs like this. So we'll init it, and it is taking some time. I don't know why. Okay, that's done. And there is one external package that we need. So I have to run the go get command, and the package that I need is github.com/shoma-lee11/slacker. All right. And just to be sure, I'll say go mod tidy. Okay. And so we have added the package that we want. So if we ls right now, we'll see our go mod and go some file, which is perfect, which is exactly what we want. So now what we'll do is we'll open up our code editor. Which is VS Code in our case. In my case, you can have any other code editor that you want, but VS Code works best for me. So I'm going to use VS Code. And now we'll start writing our code. As you know, the main file in a Go program is called main.go, and the first thing that you have to write is package main. Then you have to import some packages. I know that I'll be needing the context package. I know I'll be needing fmt to print out stuff, and log is something that I'll be needing. I'll be needing os package. And the most important thing that I'll be needing is the external package that I installed, right? So I'll say shoma-lee11/slacker. Now, if you're if you're coming from a JavaScript background, so what I did there with go get command is simply npm install, right? It's exact equivalent. So it creates those entries in your go mod and go some file, which is almost like your if you're from a Flutter background, it's almost like a pubspec YAML file or pubspec.log file. And if you're from a Node.js background, it's like a package.json and package.json.log files. That's what these are. It's very, very similar concept, right? And so what we're doing here is we are going to write our main function, func main. And in func main, I'm going to set my environments, right? So I'll say now you can set your environment in an env file, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use my OS package to actually set environments, and I'll say Slack bot token, okay, comma, and here I need to copy and paste my Slack bot token, and then I'll say set environment Slack app token. Right, so far so good. And now what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and get my tokens from the Slack. This is my bot token, so I'll copy this and I'll paste it here. This is my bot token. All right, and here is my and to find my main token, I have to come here. This is the socket token that we created. That is the XAPP one. That is our main app token. So I'll copy and paste that here as well. So far so good. And now we have to create a bot, right? So we'll say bot, an assignment operator, or the walrus operator, whatever you want to call it, slacker dot new client, and we'll say os dot get environment. We'll say Slack bot token, and we'll say comma os dot get environment Slack app token. Now you don't have to have set environment, get environment. You can directly pass the tokens here directly, right, inside the new client function. But why I'm doing this is because this makes your program more extensible. So later on, when you have to extend your program and you have those environment files or you have a production environment where you have these tokens, or you're using some program that manages all your credentials, then this comes in very handy. So I'm just getting you in the habit of going the right way from the beginning. So here we'll start a go routine, which will it doesn't do much. It just prints command events. So we'll say command events. By command events, I mean like let's say whenever I pass a command to my Slack bot, so whatever it does, whatever the way it handles the event and the event itself, it's going to print it out, right? So this means that print command events needs to be a function which we have not created right now. So let's create that function. So we'll say func print command events, and we'll say analytics channel. Chan creates a channel, and we'll say slacker dot command event, which basically we're passing here, right? And here we'll say for event, we're going to range over the analytics event analysis channel, and we're going to print out a couple of things. So we're going to print out the timestamp, as in when the command was received by Slack, right? And the command itself and the parameters that we have passed to that command, and the event, right? So let's get started. So we'll say print ln, and here I'll say command events, and then I'll say fmt dot println, and I'll say event dot timestamp. Like I said, we need the timestamp. fmt dot println event dot command, and fmt dot println. By the way, all of this is totally optional. You don't have to do all this. Like I'm printing out in my console whenever any event takes place in my program, but you don't have to do this. Event dot event, and then just an empty line. We'll print an empty line. Print ln. Okay, so far so good. Now comes the real function, the most important function. But before that, we need to write some code to actually stop our bot, cdx cancel context dot with cancel and context dot background. If you're a Golang beginner, I'm sure you already know what context does and what differ is. Differ basically make sure that the cancel is all like played, or this function is called towards the end, like when this function is about to end, right? So that's what differ does. And error is equal to bot.listen. Your bot will listen to the context. If there is an error, which means if error is not equal to null, you're going to log out the fatal. Log.fatal, fatal is the function that logs out the error. So we have used our log package that we had here. We've used our OS package to set the environments. We have used our FNP package to print out stuff. And all we need to do now is use the Slacker package, right? Now let's create the program that we need to create. So that program is bot.command. So we have the bot, we've created the bot here, right? And here we need to say bot.command. So this is where the magic is happening. My year of birth is, and you pass a parameter inside here. So this with these two angular brackets is the parameter, and you'll say ampersand slacker dot command definition, and this is the description of the command. So we'll say yob calculator, and just give an example. Example, my yob is here 2020. All right, so this is an example, and then we give it a handler. So handler is where we handle this event using a function which takes the bot context slacker dot bot context, and we pass it the request. So as if whenever we have any functions that work with HTTP kind of data or socket data, you have to have request and response, right? And request will be slacker dot request, and response will be slacker, which is the package again, dot response writer. So slacker dot request, slacker dot is response writer. We are using the slacker package here. All right. So everything makes sense till now. I hope everything makes sense till now. It's giving us one error. I don't know where the error is, but anyhow, so let's create this error. So we'll say year is equal to request dot param here. So whatever here has been passed. So when the user says my yob is here, this param we'll get into a variable called here right now using this, and then we'll have a variable called yob. So we'll say string convert dot atoi here, will convert into here. So now this means that I need another package called string convert, because this is not native to Golang. This is a package in the Golang library, right? So we have to get string convert as well. So far so good. So we have our here in yob, and then if error not equal to nil, we'll say print ln error. Okay, and then we'll say age not equal to, age equal to 2021 minus yob. To calculate age, all you have to do is year of birth has to be subtracted from the current year that's going on right now, which is 2021. If you didn't do this, right, if you don't use string convert and atoi function, you would have this in a string format, and you won't be able to subtract it here. Golang won't allow it. So to have a number, to get a number from string, you have to do this, and only then you can perform a subtraction operation, right? Because Golang is a statically typed language. You can't subtract a string and a sprint and an int. So we'll say sprintf, which formats our string for us. Age is %d, comma age. We'll say response dot reply r. So in age we store 2021 minus YOB, which is the age, and then we format it out like this with this text, and then we reply this. Now I'm getting two errors. One is this. So we don't have this package. It's saying Somali 11. We should have had it because we added it. I did add it actually. So let me say again, go get github.com/somali11/slacker. So it says it has added this package. Then I don't know why my VS Code is acting up, and then it doesn't seem to have any more errors. This is the only error that it says there is. There could be an issue with the spelling though. I mean, now there's no squiggly lines, so everything seems to be all right. And then it's giving me a red squiggly line out here. I don't know why. Let me check. So it says bot command. Okay, yes, so my mistake. This function definition, we can't close it out here. This needs to be closed somewhere out here. And here there needs to be a comma. Now there shouldn't be an error now, and yes, the spelling of command events is wrong, so I've corrected that as well. Now it's a question of I think counting these brackets. So I'm just going through it again. I have written the description, I have the command line, the description, and there's the example, there's the handler, func, request and response. Then I have the year, then I have YOB, print line, age 2021, sprintf, response reply. Everything seems to be all right to me, but it seems there's still one error, right? So it says in the event.parameters there's an issue. Yeah, that's because the spelling of parameters is wrong. And now, as you can see, we don't have any issues. I'm using a Golang plugin that helps me to find these errors without actually running the code, so which is very helpful. Now what we'll do is we'll say go build to see if there are any errors. There seem to be no errors. It has created the .exe file for us. And what we'll do now is we'll head over to our Slack channel, and here we will be expecting our bot once we start the bot, right? We start the program. And so let's do that. Let's actually start our program. So go run main.go. So it says connected to Slack with socket mode. That means everything should be fine. And so here I'll say AgeBot, and I'll say AgeBot, my YOB is 1990. So it says, the Slack bot says that you mentioned AgeBot, but they're not in this channel, so I'll say invite them, and then AgeBot automatically replies age is 31. Awesome, right? So you'll say AgeBot, my YOB is 1995. We'll say age 26. Isn't that awesome? So I hope you learned a lot in this video, and you were able to understand how to actually apply your Golang skills and how to build a Slack bot, right? And how to get the tokens from Slack, how to add those permissions, and how to enable socket mode. All of those things are really important in building a Slack bot. And also this kind of function and the package that we've used, Slacker, right? That makes making a Slack bot really easy.